Hello, and welcome to the show that, despite the pleas of our families and friends, simply will not stop talking about D&D.
So ready your spells and weapons, grab the shiniest set of your math rocks, and prepare for critical friendship. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a Q&A session. We reached out to a group on Facebook called All Things D&D and asked them to help us out in building some details about our homebrew, specifically Dan's Continent of Áluinn.
We got a few really good ones, and we're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can today. So if we don't get to yours, sorry, but maybe we'll do this again another time. So how do we want to do this?
Well, first of all, we do have some names that we're going to be pronouncing in here. We were both homeschooled, so if we mispronounce your name, I apologize. I swear we can both read, but if your name gets butchered and you hear this, forgiveness is a virtue.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty good at pronunciation, but every once in a while I can definitely get stuff wrong. So,
well, I'm dyslexic, so
I'm sorry.
We're gonna see how this goes. And yet, of the two of us, I'm the reader.
Hey, never mind. We'll get into that another time.
So, Dan, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your kingdom of Áluinn?
All right. So I'm just going to, give a little peek behind the curtain here and say that I did write a bunch of this stuff down so that I wouldn't forget. So if it sounds like I'm reading it, it's because I am.
You can hear the paper.
Yeah. So for Áluinn, it all started about 1,000 years ago. A group of adventuring wizards with their leader Arendor were traveling across the continent when a rift opened beneath the earth, and an ancient dragon broke through it and tore open a great chasm that spanned for many miles across the barren desert-like land. The adventurers battled the dragon and brought it to within inches of death, and the dragon retreated in defeat. But the adventurers discovered that because of the magical essence of the rift, the land in the center of the chasm became lush and beautiful, while the land surrounding transformed into different ecosystems.
So 2 questions right off the bat that I actually have. First, are you willing to share what kind of dragon that was, or is that a secret for the campaign?
I know I had one picked out. I just can't remember it at the moment.
Okay.
I know I was looking through some of those dragon...
The Kobold Press ones?
Yeah, the books that you gave me, and I was like, okay, there's a couple here that are really amazing, but I can't remember which one I finally picked.
Okay.
But I do have a name for it, though, which is kind of fun.
Exciting.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay. Second question. You said different ecosystems. What do you mean by different ecosystems? Because so far we've seen, in the campaign, we've seen a little bit of forest and a little bit of wasteland. Mm-hmm. And that's, we're still early in the campaign, so that's about all we've seen. So
I will say that this is kind of a newer development that I've thought of with the help of my wife, where it's kind of the feel of like a Zootopia kind of thing, where each section of the continent is actually a different ecosystem. Okay. It's blended in the middle of them, but so there's like a tundra, there's a rainforest, there's a desert land.
Worm's least favorite is the rainforest already, because he's terrified of rain.
Oh, really?
You know this.
Yeah.
He's from a cave. Rain is not supposed to come from above you, or water is not supposed to come from above you.
He's also a little bit afraid of the sun, too, because he's been around that either.
No, he just doesn't like the sun. Yeah. It's bright, and he hates it. But
right.
Rain, like water coming from above you, was a sign of something horrible's about to happen.
Yeah. That's bad.
Grab the women and children, and maybe we can use them as shields.
Oh, my. Opposite of Titanic.
It's a joke.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's got some different feels to it. I think I'm gonna add a little bit more to that later on, just to give those different feels, but with a little bit of centralized parts that are blended a bit.
Okay.
The center city, the main the main city of Áluinn, which is also called Áluinn.
It's a capital.
Basically, yeah. It's more like lush, like greeneries and stuff around it, and then it's more metropolis style buildings and stuff like that. And then we'll get into a little bit more of what that is as well. So,
okay.
But as I said, a central city was built inside and surrounding the chasm, and above it, the broken land was magically altered to be floating mountains that were also built on it. And Arendor was made king of this land and named it Áluinn, meaning chasm or canyon.
I like the floating islands thing. We've not come across that yet.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little while till you see those. Like you've seen them, but there's
probably from the airship, and that was about it.
Yeah, like you can see them from the ground, but like
aren't we pretty far away though?
They're pretty big.
Okay.
So you'd be able to see like.
So instead of seeing like mountains on the horizon, you see these weird floaty things.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then like you'll find out later, but there's like different ways of transporting between them. Of like there's ladders that are on the shorter ones, and not ladders, but like bridges.
They built bridges out of all the witches.
Yeah. How do you know she's a witch?
Build a bridge out of that. But can you not also build a bridge out of stone? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Back to you.
So Áluinn is a large enough kingdom now to contain multiple towns, some more affluent or rich than others. The towns that are farther away from the city on the outskirts of the chasm are impoverished, and then as you travel closer to the center, they're more well off. And as of right now, I only have 2 actual fleshed out towns built.
That's not true.
Well, other than the one that we built. That's right. There is one other one way up in the northwest.
Yeah, I was going to say, we built one.
Yeah. So yeah, there is that one that I'm not sure how long it's going to be for you guys to get there. So
yeah, I mean, or if we ever get there.
Yeah.
It was mostly just a fun world building exercise.
Yeah. You'll get close to it, I think, somewhat soon, because I have some more ideas that are running around that Ariel and I have been talking about. So
cool.
But yeah, so the 2 towns that you guys know about are the one that's based off of A Knight's Tale, Cheapside, and then the one that you guys are in right now called Trumbull.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's a little bit about Áluinn. Just kind of give you guys a little bit of a generality of the backstory on it and a couple of details. Cool.
So the first question that we have today comes from Stephen Lindley. And he asks, how many hours have you, as a DM, so I'm guessing that's you, Dan, put into the history of this nation, and what does that process look like to you?
Yeah. We can actually both answer this, because we are both building this world. I'm just building this one continent. So I'll give my answer. So, to be honest, this is my first homebrew ever trying to build a world. And I'm also a first-time father, so not as much time as I would like to spend on D&D and homebrew building.
That's fair.
So my process isn't fully formed. But what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of building city by city and quest by quest. So as you guys kind of travel to different places, I'm building those cities out, those towns. Mm-hmm. I know pretty much what goes in each one in general. So like inns and taverns and town squares and, stuff like that. And I also knew like the overarching storyline, which I gave a little bit of the beginnings of it in the intro here. But it's a little bit difficult right now to figure out how to get from point A to point B and then all the way to the end of point Z.
So like you have your overarching, you just don't know exactly how to get there.
Right, exactly. And I'm still in the middle of building the map and building the different towns and stuff like that, which now that I have a little bit more of an idea of what the ecosystems are and somewhat where they're going to be, I can kind of start getting to that. But as I said, it's more kind of like as you guys get to a town, I'm like, okay, I gotta like put these little things in real quick before you get there.
Buckle down and actually make the town itself.
Yeah, pretty much. But thankfully, you guys have been gracious enough to still have fun when I'm pulling stuff out of my butt.
Gross.
But what about you? Like on the other side of this world, what did we say? What the actual planet is called, or the world itself?
So I never actually named it when I had made like my map that was going to be the world. I just was using like a placeholder name. I was calling it Orbis, which just means planet.
Yeah,
I mean. It's an orb.
Yeah.
Cool. But as far as how much time did I put into the history, which part of the world are we talking about? Because I ran a homebrew in that setting for 5, close to 6, something like that, years. And so like I had the main central town that they lived in. I had it all planned out, like how this place, grew to be. It was a war-torn area that there were 3 different kingdoms kind of fighting over this rich land, and then somebody rose up and was powerful enough to kind of like be like, no, this is not yours. This section is going to be none of y'all's. And founded a city there, and then basically just like people kind of flocked to it because, there were still hostilities between these kingdoms, and they were like, hey, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Can I come live here with you? And he's like, I suppose. And then this city kind of sprung up around it, and it's not attached to any of the other like kingdoms or governments.
Yeah.
But it is now friendly with 2 of them. And whenever there's like summits held between them, it acts as like a neutral ground. Like, okay, here, this kingdom and this kingdom that both border it can come here to meet and discuss like, hey, what do we do about this third kingdom that is actively still hostile towards everyone? Like, so like there was a lot of history there. There was a lot of history in the 3 kingdoms surrounding it. And then at one point, my wife and I drew up like a whole like map on paper. Mostly my wife, because she just has a steadier hand and better eye than I do. We kind of used
mine too.
well, we kind of used the dice method where you like dump out a bucket of dice on a big sheet of paper and then just kind of clump them together. And it's like, oh hey, they trace the outline of the dice. That made me a continent here, and that made me a set of islands here, and that made me this, and like chose different things like, okay, this is going to be a mountain range, this is going to be this kind of terrain, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
did you do it where like each like kind of dice was those, or was it like
not
you just kind of picked it?
So we generally, what we did was we looked at like the areas that had a D20 on it, and then we would I had a chart at one point, but we would like look at that and then kind of decide, okay, well that's on a natural 20, so that's going to be this specific type of thing. And like, okay, so like, 5 through 10 is going to be this,
Nice. Okay.
I don't know if we ever actually wrote that chart out, but like we had kind of like had it in our heads. So we made different geography and stuff based on what was rolled.
Nice.
But we only really looked at the nat 20s or the D20s.
Okay.
And then I went through and just started making kingdoms and countries and wars and histories and alliances and all this stuff for like continents that were, thousands of miles over the ocean that my players were never going to go to. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I have the Tanin Collective and the Illustratum, and then I have Paxa, and then I have Palmarius over here, and here's Tiram, and then over here is the Nyalti Swamps, and up north of that is the Oddlands, and like just all this extra stuff that it was like, they're in this one continent, in this one like area surrounding this city, and yes, they one time traveled across one of the kingdoms to get somewhere they needed to go, and so they got to explore one of the friendly kingdoms, a little bit, but it was mostly like passing through, and I had all this history and stuff that was like built into it, and they would see something and kind of go neat and then keep moving, and I'm like, okay. So
we have a tendency to do that for some reason. Like, we're on a mission. We'll just leave that alone for now, and we'll come back to it.
And so, like, there was one town that my wife and I actually designed together, where, like, we had all these named NPCs and these stores and restaurants and like all these like different characters all over the town. And the players went to like 3 locations. I was like, of the like 20 that I had. And it was, I don't know, like the amount of time that I put into world building was more than the amount of time I put into actual quest building. So like I had the story arc that they were on, and then I had like the bones and skeletal structure of the next like 3 story arcs ready. Because they were going to go through this one, and that was going to be like how they made their name and became heroes, and then it was just going to be like, okay, the hostilities with this kingdom are boiling up, which that's where one of the player characters was from, and then, oh, there's this like goblin army that is from another character's backstory that's now, gaining in strength again, and then, okay, well, this kingdom has this going, like I had all these other arcs going on, and then the campaign ended. And one guy joined the Navy, and he moved away to be a pilot, and then another guy moved to Seattle with his girlfriend to she got a really good job there, and he was like, well, I'm going with her, obviously. And so like everybody just kind of like life moved on, and I was like, well, you guys are selfish for focusing on your futures. And so like we tried digital for a little bit when the one guy got out of basic training, but then the other dude got a job that just the schedule was so wild, and we were just like, this isn't happening. Like we can't maintain this.
The curse of a D&D party. It's I've been very lucky that the first one that we've started has stayed this long.
Well, at some point I need to start running Icewind Dale again, because that was the first one that you got involved in. And we have so many things planned for my character, and it's just been on hiatus for so long. Darn you, overtime at work. So to answer the question, I guess, I mean,
too much.
Several years worth of planning the history out and stuff like that. Like it.
And you kind of went through a little bit of the process as well of like, you built out the different arcs, and then you built out the main big stuff, and then kind of whereas I'm doing the opposite of building the smaller stuff and then trying to build out the bigger stuff after.
Well, and then at one point we went, like my wife and I, like she got out a notebook and was like writing stuff down for me while I was like, because I'm notoriously bad at actually writing stuff, like putting it on paper.
Same.
And so we were going through, and I basically started with like a creation myth. And then worked my way down from there. So it started with this one divine being that like started like creating other like lesser deities, and then handing out like, okay, this is your job. This is what you're in charge of. This is what you do. This
delegating.
And then basically went down like the family tree of the gods of where they came from and why they were created and what they're in charge of, and how basically evil entered the world, and how there was a fracture, like factions started splitting off amongst them, and like who the first one to go evil was, and like it got wild. And I have no idea where that notebook went. I still have it all in my head, but if I ever have a brain injury, the whole section of that world is just gone.
Wait, you don't already? Thought that's why you had so much D&D stuff.
No, that's just because I have so I have ADHD, but when there's something I'm interested in, it's like a hyper focus on it.
Of course.
And so like anything else, my brain is just like, oh hey, yeah, you're talking about something important, and I hear the Charlie Brown wah, 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 wah.
See,
And then it's like D&D, and I'll sit there and read a D&D like rule book for like 4 hours straight before I realize how much time has passed. And my daughter's the same way. She brought me the Kobold Press Deep Magic book the other day, and I read like half of it in one sitting to her. And then the next day, like it was still sitting there, and she was like, "Daddy, can we read more of that?" She's 5, by the way.
yeah.
She's like, "Can we read more of that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, kiddo, come here." And I pulled it out, and we finished the book. And I was like, man,
How much time had gone by?
a lot. But I was like, man, this is, and you know, there were some sections I skipped because she's only 5, and when it starts talking about, you know, like blood magic and fiend magic and stuff like that, I'm like, maybe not quite yet.
Yeah, maybe leave that stuff for later.
Yeah, but
cool.
So, question 2 is from Jessica Steele. Did you have to create the world, or was it based off of an already written book?
So, technically, so I'm building on your world, technically, but my continent, I'm trying to make up as much of it as possible.
Okay.
Like I said, I have the overarching story made up completely, but there are certain towns that I get for movies,
like
Cheapside from A Knight's Tale, the different ecosystems from Zootopia, stuff like that.
Dan, it's waters. Did they reek? I was walking down from Cheapside.
Yeah. I knew it was the song. I just couldn't think of the next line.
It was there along the River Thames. Its waters did they reek?
Yep. I am ashamed.
You should be. How dare you?
But yeah, no. So like this world is, I'm trying to make up as much of it as I can, because I don't want to get too many things from other places, because I don't want to have to worry about like if I ever write this stuff down and like, you know, it becomes something more. I don't want to have to worry about plagiarism or copyright or anything like that. I want to be able to let it be its own thing, which is really cool, because I get to collaborate with you, and I get to collaborate with my wife and whoever else really wants to get in on it, and we don't have to worry about it, you know?
Yeah.
But again, I do get certain things from movies, and mostly movies, because I'm not much of a reader. But I do like certain books.
I am.
I've read Lord of the Rings, so we're good.
I'm proud of you.
And The Hobbit.
I'm proud of you. Oh my gosh, now read The Silmarillion. Such a good book, though.
I know.
It's so good.
I've heard such good things about it, but I've also heard such, like, not bad things, but like people call it boring.
So I disagree with the boring. I would say dense.
Dense.
There's a lot to it, but if you can get into it, it is such a fascinating book.
I'm sure.
But that's my inner Tolkien fangirl coming out. So I think with your whole thing about like wanting to make up as much of it as possible and have no like plagiarism or as very little stealing from other things as possible, it's a noble goal, but you have to remember a little bit of biblical wisdom here, that there is nothing new under the sun.
Right.
So like, and that's kind of something I ran into with my half of the world too, is it's like, you want as much of it to be like completely unique and new and original. And then like you start describing something and one of your players goes, "Hey, is that from this?" And it's like, well, no, but I mean, I guess like I was not thinking of that when I came up with this, but like I guess it is like
it's always going to be in your brain of different things that you love and you like, and
it's like it's going to come through. Yeah, it's very similar to that. Or I would be describing something and somebody would be like, "Oh, I know what this is from. This is from some obscure thing I'd never heard of before," and I'm like, I don't know what that is at all. And they're like, oh, really? It's this, blah, blah. And they'd like sit there and describe exactly what you just talked about. And then it's like, well, I've never read that.
Hi, you've never seen that movie.
But I guess I stole from this thing I've never heard of. Like if I base it off of something else, I will always be like, yeah, it's off of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like I mean, straight up, one of the goddesses, my one of my players was a cleric, and he wanted to have one of the goddesses from the Forgotten Realms, and he was like, hey, can my goddess be Elistrahi? And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
Now, if this was ever going to become like a podcast or something like that, where we had like a live play campaign, we would be changing the name of that.
Yeah.
Also, one of the kingdoms that I have was like, I literally was completely like mentally dead the day they were going into this kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, oh, what's this kingdom called? And I just got on Google Translate and punched in potato. And so...
In what language did you look it up?
I think it ended up being in Latin. It was like capsicum or something like that.
Okay.
And so it was like, and I just told them the name. They're like, oh, that's a neat name. And then later my wife was like, so what was that? And I was like, it means potato. Like, and so like if anything ever comes of it, I'd probably change that name too, because it's
but why though?
I mean, I guess
a good name.
Because we'd have the one dude that speaks Latin be like, wait, did you just name your kingdom Potato? Yes, I did.
Atreya would be proud.
Atreya, which is funny because that's actually where her character's from, and it was before she ever made that character.
That's amazing.
And then so when she was like putting that as part of her thing, where she's just like loves eating potatoes, especially like raw potatoes, thinks it's a travesty to cook them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you realize she's from a kingdom named Potato, right? And she goes, no, I didn't. But that's funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like there was random things like that where it's like, oh, hey, what is this place called? And it's like, Google Translate. Like, I mean, I named I had a named monster that was, I just punched in Ripper and then translated it, I think, to Croatian or something like that.
Okay.
And so it came out with a great name. It was Trebozjak. And I was like, okay, that's kind of intimidating and scary and also fits,
Yeah.
Like, and so like there's a lot of that just like, I'm like, man, I really should have thought of a name beforehand. Google Translate, help me.
The way I came up with the name for Áluinn, I was going through Google Translate, looking for different meanings or different words for crevice or chasm or things like that in a different language. So I was looking in, I believe it was Gaelic, so a very Scottish or Irish.
Love Gaelic.
Yeah, I love it. I
can't speak it, but I love the sound of it. It sounds so beautiful.
Yeah. So I was looking up those words and came across Áluinn, and I was like, oh man, this is a beautiful name. Ever since that day, every time I try to tell someone that that's what it is, I cannot find it.
Huh.
I cannot find it. I look it up in Gaelic or whatever it was, and I look up Áluinn, can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't mean what I think it means, or whatever it was. And I'm like, how did I get this? But anyway.
Yeah.
But Google Translate's definitely a good way.
I mean, you could
to
probably
get
punch
names.
in the word Áluinn, and then it'll say what it detects.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I did.
Oh, and it's just not. It's
it
not
either doesn't come up or it comes up with a different meaning than what I had originally had it.
Weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Interesting.
All about Áluinn.
You dreamed it.
Yeah, I must have.
Okay.
But yeah, I was gonna say the you were talking about how like the goddesses and gods in your world you were naming and stuff like that. It actually kind of perfectly leads into this next question. Comes from Ian Furstenworth.
Furstenworth is such a great name.
It is. I think that's
if we're
probably
pronouncing
my
it
name.
correctly.
Yeah.
It sounds like a D&D character
It
name.
does. It sounds like one of Matt's.
Like, yeah. I am Lord Scorvin von Furstenworth. Like, that's amazing. Ian, you have a great name. I hope you hear this.
I hope that this person hears it, and also
We
someday,
pronounced it correctly.
someday we get to like do a live play, and he hears his name again
As an NPC.
As an NPC.
That's amazing. He's one of the nobles of Áluinn.
Yeah, for sure.
Lord Furstenworth. And we're being completely sincere when we say that is a phenomenal last name, sir.
So I kind of combined a couple of questions together. So this is a combined person question. So it's from Ian Furstenworth and Scott Pearson. They both had similar questions. So the questions they had were, what gods are present? Or did I add gods to the pantheon, and what was the inspiration, and what are their domains?
Okay, so that's a lot. That's several questions, and I think this would actually be a fun one for us to both answer. Not that we haven't both been answering, because you and I had some differences on this one.
Yes.
And I actually think that it was really fun to leave it more ambiguous, because my wife was like, well, don't you guys have to make a decision which one's real? And I'm like, no, we don't. So on my side of the world, because we split it like north to south.
Was that what it was?
Yeah. So we both have all of the different climates, but we split it north to south.
Okay. Oh, okay. From north to south.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
not you have the northern, I have the southern, is like I have the eastern, you have the western.
Right. Okay.
So on my half of the globe, it's polytheism is believed in. Mm-hmm. So there was one over God, or however you want to say it, that created all of the other ones, and there's among those ranks there's greater deities and lesser deities and stuff like that. Yeah. And then essentially you could ascend to godhood by if you come up with a new concept, and it becomes some like it goes out into the world. And I don't mean a new concept like, oh hey, I invented a flying machine. It's like no, that falls under artifice. Yeah. But like if you come up with a genuinely new thing that doesn't exist already and are able to manifest it in the world, then you become the god of whatever that is. And depending on how greatly it changes things depends on whether you're a greater deity or a lesser deity. So like for instance, there's a god of martyrdom who was the first person to ever selflessly sacrifice himself for the good of other people and to take on their suffering for them. And so he became, on his death, a deity that is over kind of the domain of martyrs. And so like he protects them and lessens their pain and stuff like that, and you know, blesses them on their death and stuff like that, because he invented this whole new selfless act of being martyred for other people. So there's stuff like that happens where it's like some people are attempting to reach godhood, but when do you ever come up with a brand new concept while you're trying to think of a brand new concept? So it's kind of like, you know, Sisyphus pushing the boulder uphill. He's never going to make it. Right. The other way was if you could carve off a piece of another deity's divine domain, and basically if you got enough people following you and worshiping you and praying to you and stuff like that, and then you were able to create a basically outer plane of your own that would generally start off as a demi-plane, and then you would grow it and cultivate it into something like Mount Celestia or the Abyss or something like that. Yeah. You could create your own divine plane, and then you would have your worshipers, and then when they died, their souls would go to you, which would add on to your power, and eventually you would become a deity. But that way was kind of like okay, I'm going to kind of steal from this guy a little bit, just carve off a piece of his domain and make
Seems
it
like
mine.
It takes a little longer to, quote unquote. It seemed like almost a bit more work.
Yeah, well, and you would also have to have some form of immortality while you wait to gather enough strength and stuff like that. And certain types of immortality will have, you know, beings like Maruts and stuff like that come after you because you're going against the natural order of things. Yeah. So, like, if you become a lich so that you can gain the immortality so that you can wait until you've become a deity, well, you might end up with, one of the other gods hunting you down and killing you for,
going against the natural order.
defying the cycle of life and death, But most of them I kind of came up with on my own. So, like, there was the first one, and then he basically created matter, and then created a god that was the god of creativity.
Mm.
So he blessed him with creative thinking and creative thought.
Yeah.
And basically put him in charge as the advisor to all of the gods that came after him, where when they wanted to build something or create something or make something new, they would go and consult with this specific deity, and then he would give them his advice. But eventually that turned into, okay, well, now he's getting these ideas from these other gods and goddesses and saying, oh, I can do that better than you can because my mind is more expanded than yours, and then would just start taking over and, elbowing and shoving his way into all of these other domains instead of doing what his job was of basically top advisor to all of the other deities.
Right, yeah.
And therefore, became like the prideful, almost Luciferian or Melkor style deity that fell and became less than he was granted because he wanted more.
Yeah. Nice.
And then after he was banished from this world, the divine domain of creativity and creative thought was passed on to a different deity. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that can also happen, is the mantle can be passed on.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But your side of the world is very different.
Yeah. My side of the world is very much monotheistic. So I'm gonna read my answer here.
It's kind of fun because Dan chose the questions we were going to answer, and so he had more time to think about these, and I'm just like riffing because I did have the 5 some odd years of experience of just plotting this out in way too much detail.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh yes, I remember doing this.
Yeah, and I'm just now doing this, so.
Hey, but you sound more prepared than I do because you knew the questions beforehand.
True. Sorry.
I'm not. This is great. It's letting me remember some of what I made.
Yeah, it's true. So the way I wrote this down was because it is a very interesting question because of this difference in the two halves of the world. Mm-hmm. So basically the way I said it was I understand, like, in a lot of D&D they use a lot of polytheism and those kinds of things in the world lore, and that there's a lot of gods and demons and domains and stuff like that. But me, as a Christian, and you as well are a Christian, but for me, I was a little less comfortable with that idea of the polytheism. So I wanted to try to simplify it a little bit more for my side of the world. I'm not completely against it. Like, I'm not telling you, oh, you shouldn't have it like that. No,
don't worry. I wasn't thinking that, Dan. I know you well enough. But I guess our audience doesn't.
Yeah, for more so the audience, I'm not trashing people who have, polytheistic worlds that they're building. Just for me and my comfortability.
You better not. Tolkien did.
Oh yeah, no. And who can blame him? But yeah, so on my side of the world, it is a monotheistic homebrew, which means there's only one God. But there are a lot of powerful beings and angelic and demonic things that can grant divine power.
That are godlike.
They're godlike, but they're not God. Mm-hmm. There is one God and one God only who is the overseer of everything. Mm-hmm. Kind of like yours, and I think we kind of made it where it was the same overarching God.
Yeah, so the over God is the same deity, like the one on my side is the same deity that they venerate and worship on your side. It's just on my side, they believe that all of these other beings that he delegated out tasks to, they believe that they're also gods, whereas yours, it's like, no, they're celestials of some sort.
Yeah. So
fallen or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. Which is cool because in one of our last sessions, one of my players got to meet one of these celestial angels.
Yeah, because he became a
celestial
divine soul
sorcerer.
Because it was between that and the Celestial Pact warlock.
Right. Yeah. So he doesn't know the name of it or anything because it was just a quick
he was dying and it spoke to him.
Basically.
Oh, yeah, for those of you who have been following our previous episodes, we survived.
Oh, hey,
that wild encounter that we were so worried about. Dan was worried he would TPK us, and I was like, we're all going to die, but it's okay. We survived.
Hey.
It was great. Sorry, quick side note, but, back to you.
Perfect, yeah. So, as Ozzy was laying there dying, this celestial came up and was like, you can either die here on the ground, or you can follow my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And my purpose, and if you want to call it his domain, is chivalry, courage, and protection. So he embodies that.
Crap, and I had a god that was over that, but I don't remember the name for it. Which means we get to work that out together.
We get to work it out, yeah! Nice. But yeah, so I wanted to make my homebrew a little bit different from most of the other ones, where it followed a little bit more of my personal beliefs and just didn't make me feel like, oh, there's going to be an element of, I don't want to say blasphemy because it's not blasphemy.
Yeah.
It's a creative thinking way of doing things.
Yeah. But you didn't want to have to turn your thoughts into such an unnatural way of thinking just to appease the desire for, okay, well, my cleric wants to follow this,
Right. But still give them an option.
You still have that option to follow different beings, but it's not like forcing your brain into saying, oh, well, this is the god of...
And it's not so much a worship kind of thing either. It's more like
you follow their tenets.
Yeah, this god here, or this, like, the overarching god gave power to these angels, and the fallen angels also have this power and can grant that to others.
Yeah.
So it's not a worship, it's a
follow the tenets, and if you're following one of the good ones, it's still going towards and that's kind of the way like worship of any of the good gods still went to that one on my side, because it was like all of their power was granted by this one. And so anything in creation that was not fallen or evil was for him. And even the things that were fallen and evil and dark and corrupted were, okay, it's in my plan. So go ahead and go ahead, Melkor, sing your little song. It's all part of my grand verse.
Yeah.
I fall on Tolkien a lot, just because it's read
the genius.
Read the Silmarillion, man.
I'll have to borrow it because I don't think I have it.
But back to kind of something we mentioned at the top of this question. It was actually fun. Kind of working this out between you and I, because Heather at one point asked me, okay, well, so who's right? Because like you have your side of the world that's worshiping multiple gods, and Dan has his side of the world that's got like a god and then a bunch of angels and fallen angels and fiends and demons and stuff like that. So like, who's right? And I said, well, okay, look at our world, if you can, from a secular point of view. You have hundreds of different religions, and from a secular person's point of view, who's right? They don't know. And so that's why you have agnostics and stuff like that, because it's like, well, they don't believe they can know who is right and who is wrong, so they're just like, I choose to abstain and not know. And so it's like you have this side of the world that is fully firm in their belief that there is only one, and the rest are celestials or fiends of some sort. And then you have this other side of the world that fully believes that no, these aren't, like, there are celestials, but they're like, these ones are gods, and you cannot convince me otherwise. And so it's kind of like that little bit of realism in it. And Heather was like, okay, but which one of you is correct? And I was like, we don't have to make that decision, because that's up to each individual player which belief they fall into. Is it mono or poly? Like, what does your character believe? And she was like, well, I want to believe whichever one is correct in the world. And I was like, well,
which one do you think is correct?
Like, I don't know. In the real world, I'm pretty darn convinced that I'm correct, but like, not everybody is. And you know what? I'm sorry, more power to you. I wish you would see things my way, but I can't force you to. So like, your character, which one do you think is correct? Which one does Atreya believe in? And she was like, well, she's a barbarian. I don't have to make that decision. And I was like, that's fair. Worm doesn't either.
I was gonna say that's the nice thing so far about this the players that I have is
nobody's trying to get super into that.
Exactly. Like, there are clerics and stuff that I've had in the world so far, and they haven't been a problem. So
yeah, like it was one that showed up to Lord Chabaris's house and was helping him with a healing decision, and then like we were like, okay, cool, you got this handled, we're gonna go deal with this thing, and then we all almost died. I actually really like the fact that neither one of us has taken the like, no, this is what's actually right. It's like, no, it's up to you.
It's up to whoever's DMing at that point.
Well, it's not just that, it's up to your player, because if Heather wanted to like play a cleric and say like, oh yes, I'm following the god of this specific thing, other people around could be like, no, that's not a god, that's a celestial. But she can have the full belief that like, yeah, no, this is real. Like, I had a guy playing a one shot set on my half of the world that he believed in dualism.
Okay.
So there's a god of good and a god of evil, and it's actually the same god, but it has two different faces. And like he was like he was super into it. And then the NPCs would look at him and be like, no, that's not real. And he's like, oh, who are you to tell me that my religious beliefs are wrong? And like, he would get into this like really long debate with these NPCs that were kind of just like, I don't want to be here right now. Like, this guy's weird. And so like, it was this fun little thing that like, he created his own little bit of lore that his character was convinced was real. And it was never official lore, but Barry believed it was fact. So I was like, go for it, dude. Like, have fun.
I mean, that's the way to do it.
Like you be your character, as long as you're not disrupting the game.
And as long as it doesn't create, problems for the other players of like, are you fighting over this? Are you doing PC versus PC because you know?
Well,
he's on his crusade of,
No, he never did that. Like, if people asked him about it, he had these like really long-winded spiels talking about it, but then he would like, people would be like, okay, Barry, that's enough. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I thought you were interested. That's why you brought it up.
Right, yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I just had a question. I didn't need your whole, pitch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it was rather fun. So we have question number 4. Mark Bloomberg asked, I hope that's correct, Mark Bloomberg, what is magic like in your world? Do you want me to split all of these up, or do you want me to
No,
ask?
you can read them all.
Okay, so it's, what is magic like in your world? Is it commonplace, or would people be surprised by its use? Or would they even be frightened? Are magical items commonplace, or are they rarities of intrigue? Are there dealers of such items, or are they hoarded in the vaults of kings and queens, or even lost to time hiding in ancient ruins? So he's asking, I guess, is this like a super high fantasy setting, or mid fantasy, or low fantasy?
Right. So on my side of the world, again, it is very much so. Magic was always present on the continent. whatever, villages and stuff were there, they always had some kind of magician or shaman or, whatever it was that they had magic. But when the rift appeared, it, with its magical properties, magic became of more importance and of prevalence. The knowledge was sought after, and the ability to do magic became more commonplace. Magic items are more commonplace toward the center of the kingdom, where lesser magic items are used for everyday mundane tasks. Like, so for an example, I gave these couple of examples to Ariel earlier. It was like, a ring of levitation or boots of levitation are used to hang up signs. Okay. like they just are able to lift up and put a sign on their store.
So it's a very magic reliant society in the capital.
It is very much enchantment based.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's not necessarily that they're all like great practitioners of magic, right, but they all have like minor wondrous magic items that help them to do these day-to-day things.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So like if you took your thing to a repair shop, he would probably have a wand or scroll or something of mending rather than learning the trade of...
That was the other example I gave, was like Atreya's hammer. Like, those are things that you can break it down or you can build it. It's a very day-to-day task that you can do with a magic item very easily. So think, the wizarding world of Harry Potter, like they do all of their stuff with magic. So they can do these things, but more so with magic items, not with actual, like, they can do magic. It's more through the items. But there are definitely more rare items that are set aside for adventurers and for the armies that are sent out and given special, higher abilities to use these items. And then there are even rarer items that are meant specifically for the king and for his inner circle.
So this makes me think somewhat of the Netherese Empire in the Forgotten Realms, where at the heart of their cities... So at the heart of yours, you said there's a magical rift. So at the heart of the Netherese Empire cities, they would have these massive magical, like, super powered, basically nuclear reactors of magic called mythalars.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were such a powerful empire because they could make all of these, like, mass produce magical items that were like really powerful, but they were powered by the mythalar. And so like if they got too far away from it, it would start to weaken and then it would become a mundane item again. But because their cities could move, it was like, okay, so we're going to fly our city over, the area that we want to conquer. We can send our troops to the ground with these insanely powerful magical items, wreck shop, and they never have to get outside of the range of the mythalar. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that some way that like the people protecting the capital of Áluinn actually do, or is it they've harnessed it and it's no longer reliant on that, and now it's an independent item that can go where it needs to?
It's more so like that, where
like
they have this source of magic that they can use to enchant items, and they're able to be brought out.
So it's almost like sorry, I'm not trying to compare these things, because this is a thing that I'm sure you haven't read. It's the starter set for 5th edition.
Right.
You're looking for this mine that inside was this legendary, basically object item location called the Spellforge. That was specifically, like, it was a magical wellspring that they would use for enchanting items, and then they could sell them, and that was like the big trade of the Wave Echo Cave. And so they would forge things in the Spellforge, and they would have magical properties because of that, and then they would sell them.
That's basically it, yeah.
Okay, so it's like a more massive scaled Spellforge, but it's a rift.
it's a rift that the dragon itself came through.
Came from the other side of the rift?
From the other side of the rift,
okay.
But there's magic that's pouring in from this
There's
rift.
some kind of interdimensional magic in this rift. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So. Very cool. Very cool.
Which I think we had talked about when we first...
I think we had talked about, but for some reason my brain, like, I misremembered it, and I was remembering you saying, like, oh, there was this magical rift here, and the dragon was trapped underground, and then it broke out from underground. I didn't remember that it came through the rift and then clawed its way to the surface.
Yeah. So,
that's a detail that my brain had just gotten twisted.
Just twisted it a little bit, yeah.
Like for the first several sessions of the campaign, I thought everything around in this area was like mainly wasteland except for these tiny pocket oases.
Right.
And then I said that and you were like, no, that's not how it is. I was like, wait, it's not?
I think we had originally said that when we were starting to build the world, and then I was like, you know what? It probably needs to be a little bit different because it was a wasteland.
Part of that might have been due to the fact that one of the dragons you were looking at, like in depth, was the wasteland dragon.
Yeah.
And so that's probably part of what got it stuck in my head that, it's all wasteland.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's probably what it was.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it was a wasteland, and now it's
becoming more lush due to the magical influence.
It has been, like, for a long time. It's been 1,000 years. So, like, from that point, it started to spread.
And then as you get further out, it's less and less.
It's less and less. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Got it. Got it. Oh, yeah, I actually had a follow-up question on what you were talking about. So Áluinn, capital Áluinn, seems very dependent on magic. And you were talking about, like, okay, a lot of their more mundane tasks they have delegated to magical item use. And it's been this way for like 1,000 years, right?
It hasn't been like that for 1,000 years, but it did grow into that that 1,000 years.
So there's a whole generation of people, more or less, that have become very reliant on the use of everyday magical items that replace skill and knowledge and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen to that kingdom if... I mean, this is complete hypothetical. I'm not saying that this is where it needs to go or anything. But say there's a powerful celestial or fiend or even just a really powerful wizard that creates a dead magic zone there. Mm-hmm. Will that city's society start to fall apart because, okay, we don't have tradesmen anymore. We have, instead of like, you know, somebody who can come in and repair your roof, we have somebody shows up with a magic hammer and goes, dink, you're done, fix it Felix style. And now, okay, this is now a dead magic zone, or something happens to the rift where it's no longer allowing this type of mass production of items to happen. What happens to the everyday man? What happens to the society where there's now... I'm not going to say no, but it seems like a lot, like very diminished skilled laborers there. Mm-hmm. So what becomes of Áluinn then?
So let me put it this way. There is a storyline in process that I'm coming up with.
Oh no, did I stumble on the truth?
Not really. Like it's something that's been on my mind of... Okay, so I like I said, I trust you to not metagame, so I can tell you at least this, that one of the things that has been worried about is that it does seem like the magic is diminishing.
Okay.
So it's all diminished at the edges of the continent. It's starting to
collapse back in on itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not something that most people have noticed yet, but the king does know about it. I don't know if you remember, but I did ask you for an insight check on one of the first...
When he was like looking super concerned and worried. Got it.
So But I failed that because... You failed it because you're not very insightful.
You would think as a ranger I would have higher wisdom, but I dumped all my stats into other things because spellcasting was a tertiary.
Yeah. So I don't expect this...
Chose spells with no saving throws.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't expect you guys to get to this storyline for a while, but it is something that's in the works where you'll find
it's an overarching issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, well that answers my my little.
Let's put it this way: I'm glad I had an answer for that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I was asking it as like a, hey, if you don't have an answer, let's come up with one here and brainstorm. But that's awesome. Glad you got that. Question number 5.
By the way, this is also why he is sending you on these different missions, so that he knows that he can trust you, because there is a very, very, very inner circle that he keeps, and he wants
I think
to
we
make
discussed
sure,
that at one point.
Yeah.
When we were first brainstorming some of this.
A little bit of that will be revealed in this next question.
Okay, cool.
A little.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good segue. Question number 5. Taggart Williams asks, who are some notable historical figures that would be common knowledge or maybe have mythology surrounding them? So this is kind of fun because the only player who would know any of this would be your wife, because she's the only player character who is from Áluinn.
Yep.
Everybody else is from, I think Heather's from my side of the globe. Worm is from somewhere undetermined in the Underdark.
Yeah, and I think Ozzy as well.
And I think Ozzy came from, if I'm not mistaken, he came from Tanin.
Okay.
Which is funny because if Worm dies and my backup character shows up, he's from Illustratum, which was in direct conflict and at war with the Tanin Collective.
Oh no!
So
that's gonna be interesting.
Well, okay, he's a defector because he got disillusioned with the war, but it'll be interesting having that dynamic between.
Yeah.
This is why I shouldn't plan backup characters so strongly, because I get so invested and interested, and then I think of things like this and I go, ooh, but what if Worm did die? I don't want him to, Dan, but if it ever happens, there'll be some cool stuff that we can play around with between the three of us.
That'll be fun. So yeah,
Back to the question.
Yeah. So back to the question. Originally, I will say that the one I'm going to mention right now is the only thing I really had up until this point. When this question was asked, I was like, okay, I've got to come up with some good ones. Well, and then today I was like, okay, I've got some.
It's kind of nice because from what I understand is it's a fairly young kingdom. So the king is an elf, correct?
No.
No? What is the king?
He is human.
He is human. Okay, he's just been alive for a long time.
He's been alive for over 1,000 years.
Okay, so there's some sort of interesting stuff going on with him. Okay, I thought he was an elf.
Nope.
Okay, so I just figured, Dan, he likes elves. Probably an elf. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah. But it's not a terribly old kingdom, correct?
It's about 1,000 years old.
Okay.
So it's
older
it was
than
built
America.
It's been building for I would say it took them about a couple hundred years to get the actual city up and running.
But it's old enough to have mythology. You know, right. America's not all that old, and we still have historical and almost mythological, people from our past.
Yeah, I more did the historical side of things of these are some notable people that if you talk to Aaliyah about it, she'll know these people or she'll know about them.
That's kind of cool because I made the city that they were playing in on my side of the world fairly young. Like it was only 200, 300 years old because one of them started asking me all these questions about history and I was like, it's really not that old, dude. and it was just kind of like
maybe some of your people have come from my side.
It's possible. but it was just kind of funny that it was like a snap decision of I don't have an answer for this. It's fairly young. It's only a couple. There's elves alive right now that were adults before this city was ever a thing. So
cool. Okay, so the first one I have is Arendor, the king of Áluinn. He's a human, known for defeating Volcander, the ancient dragon and founding, or the ancient dragon and founding the city of Áluinn.
I like that name.
Isn't that fun?
Vulcan, it sounds like a fire dragon of some sort. Just because,
we'll see.
Just because Vulcan was the Roman name for Hephaestus, who was also god of fire and stuff like that. So like Vulcan and also volcano and like all these.
Yeah,
just makes me think fire. Which, again, don't let that sway you at all. If you have a different dragon in mind.
I don't want him to be a fire dragon because that's just way too
overdone.
I want it to be something cool.
I mean, and with you looking through the Tome of Beasts and the creature codexes, like there's so many other options for dragon that are like, I mean, for crying out loud, why pick a red dragon when you can pick a void dragon? Like
that might have been it.
Oh dear God. How did he beat that thing? Those things are freaking insane.
I'm not
although it
100% sure.
It would make sense a void dragon coming through a dimensional rift.
Yeah.
Because like if you read their lore, it's like it's right there. They love to dimension hop.
Yeah. And I think that's what made me think about or made me decide on that one because I think it was
I don't think we can beat that, Dan.
We'll see.
And if we do, I understand why they left it within an inch of its life and let it go.
Well, that's the thing is like they didn't kill it.
Yeah,
so...
that's my favorite dragon from the Kobold Press books. Yeah. It's so cool. And when it dies, it's way more deadly than it is when it's alive. Don't worry, no meta knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, so then obviously Volcander is another historical / mythological, if you want to call it that. But I gave him a secondary subname too, and I'm really happy with it. Okay, so it's Volcander the Rift Breaker.
That Gusta, he got a title on it.
Yeah, I was so happy.
So here's a question. So, Arendor?
Arendor is the king.
Arendor. Cool. I wasn't able to find it before I remembered. Okay. So Arendor and his adventuring party, they fought off Volcander.
Mm-hmm.
Has he been seen since?
No.
Are there... So that can play into the mythology of it. Are there rumors where people will tell stories of like, oh man, you know what happened in this area? There used to be a city there, and it could even be that there never even was. Like, man, there used to be a city there, and it was the first sighting of Volcander in a couple 100 years, and he showed up and just blasted the land. They have like this elaborate story of what happened, and it's like, you're full of it. That never happened. But you know, that's how mythology goes. Like, any kind of tragedy can even be like, oh yeah, there was an earthquake. It's earthquake.
An earthquake. I love those.
I want an earthquake now. I don't know what it is, but
I'd rather earth pie though.
Pie is better, objectively speaking. Heather disagrees with me, but she's wrong. She's allowed to be wrong, but she's wrong. But like, you know, any natural disaster, like, oh, there was a really bad storm and lightning struck 3 times in this same city, and it's like, oh, it was Volcander, he's cursing, you know.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So even if he hasn't been seen in, you know, all this time, people still like
they
speak his name in whispers, and like there's like a really heavy cloud cover, and somebody swears they saw the shadow of Volcander flying overhead, you know, like crazy, just wild stuff like that, where it's complete made up
utter
whole
nonsense,
cloth, but people believe it because that has so much to do with the founding of their kingdom that they're just like, well, it could be true. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
He's just the thing that they blame all of their misfortune on. Like, oh, my crops died. It must be Volcander. Like, why? Because he's out there still. Like,
he didn't die.
And there could even be people who believe that he's dead.
Yeah,
and like, no,
he's never coming back.
He died of his injuries. Like in the Hobbit movie, not in the Hobbit books, but like they talk about Azog, and he's like, oh, he died of his injuries years ago. Where in the book that's true, but like, you know,
Azog the Defiler.
Yeah, like they're just like, oh, he's not a thing. He died years ago, like, you know, all those 1,000 years ago or so. Like, the king killed him. He just injured him, and he flew off and died in a pit by himself. And we don't ever have to worry about him again. And then you have the hardcore believers that he's still there and twisting fate against the kingdom. You know, like,
or, you know, even in Harry Potter, the whole like Voldemort thing is like, everybody is trying to dissuade everyone from thinking that he's coming back or that he is back, and it's like the minister of magic being, no, he's not back. Yeah. Things like that. It's nope, he's back.
Yeah. That's cool. I like that little snippet of mythology.
Yeah.
This is why this episode was a good idea. I think we should do a part 2 of this because we have a lot more questions.
I think we're only going to get through this and then probably end it. But and I really want to get through this because this was really fun for me to do.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Speaking objectively, I'm just enjoying myself. You guys at home might not, but I'm enjoying myself, and that's really what this podcast is about.
This is fun.
Me.
And me. And us together.
Okay.
Imagine me and you. I do. Anyway. Okay.
This is why we have like 3 friends. All right, Volcander the Rift Breaker. Let's get back on it.
All right. So the next set of people that I came up with today is Arendor's adventuring party. And so this adventuring party was a group of wizards that were...
We had discussed that. Yes, I remember.
Yeah. And so Ariel and I were talking about, what's their name? So they're a bunch of wizards. So they're probably going to be more on the intelligent,
higher educated,
more literal, whatever they were.
So they're all specifically wizards. They're not different types of spellcaster. They're all specifically wizards.
So they are some of them are multi-classed. Some of them are specific schools of magic of wizards.
As wizards are.
Yeah. But yeah, there's no sorcerers or druids or anything.
Did you ever watch that video I sent you about the all-wizard adventuring party? Dear God, I want to play that campaign so bad.
This is basically why I wanted to do this.
In case you ever did a prequel.
Something, yeah. I thought it would be really fun.
That would be fun.
Or at least, make a book or a storyline about it or whatever. But, so... the adventuring party was called the Map Mages.
The Map Mages.
The Map Mages.
Okay.
So they were sent into this continent to basically
get a lay of the land,
explore and conquer to an extent. Not conquer, but make a place for people to come in and live. Mm-hmm. Get rid of monsters and things that live here that aren't good.
So it was uninhabited by regular humanoid life,
right? Yeah. So there's smaller villages and stuff out there that were there long before, but they weren't necessarily the part that they were trying to conquer. But
there were people here before.
There were some, yes. Not
are they still around, or have they assimilated?
Most of them I would say have assimilated, but there's
pockets.
Probably pockets here and there of people that have been there for a long time.
Cool.
So we have the party.
Ooh.
We have a halfling evocation transmutation wizard named Nori Undertow, also known as the Cartographer. We have a male elf divination abjuration wizard named Cadence, who was the navigator. Next we have a male half-orc necromancy wizard named Malgrith, also known as Deadhead.
Good name, Malgrith.
Ariel came up with that.
It's a good name.
Then a half-elf enchantment conjuration wizard named Alistera, also known as Chastity. And then a human enchanted wizard paladin named Arendor.
Okay.
The king, also known as Valiant.
Interesting.
So they all had code names.
So when they tell these like stories of their exploit, or when people tell the stories of their exploits, they can use and then Valiant, that way they don't always have to use the Chad, this person say they can like simplify it by using their nicknames and stuff.
Yep.
I like it.
It's pretty fun.
I have a nickname too.
Yeah.
My nickname is Victor.
Good job, Worm. You remembered.
It's my human name, I think.
So I kind of wanted to, before I get into the rest of these, one quick little side note that kind of answers a little bit of a question that we'll get to later on in another episode, probably. One of the things that someone asked was what separates this particular world from other, either, the Forgotten Realms or whatever. One of the things, two things. One of the things is that when you step foot on Áluinn,
oh, yes.
and I had forgotten to tell you guys this in the beginning.
Until one of the latest sessions.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 sessions ago. But you suddenly feel a burst or a wave over you that then makes you able to speak and understand Draconic.
So it wasn't a huge change for Worm because that was already his first language.
But you I think would have been the only one to realize it until later on that people were speaking Draconic. Because everybody else is thinking, oh, I'm speaking in my own language, and nothing has changed.
Atreya's first language is Draconic as well as Aussie.
Okay, well, then they would understand too. But Aaliyah, who's lived here all her life...
Yuan-Ti and Lizard folk both have Draconic as a racial language.
Okay, cool. So they would have all understood it then.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden people are speaking...
So speak my language!
Even though they are speaking common, everyone is now speaking Draconic. So other
Draconic
thing
is common here.
Exactly, basically, but it's magically so. The other thing, and
if that enchantment ever breaks, just the Tower of Babel ensues.
basically, yeah. And who knows, that might happen.
It's like listening to a Pearl Jam song.
Yeah. But yeah, so the reason I bring this up with or this second point up with this question is that you'll notice that the only one who has a last name, and this is not because of this particular thing, but the only one who has a last name is the halfling.
Undertow.
Yeah. But that's more of like a halfling thing in the world. Like they just kind of always have a name that associates them to kind of who they are and what they are.
Okay.
But everyone else has to earn their last name.
Huh.
So
it's all kind of a title.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Even Arendor still doesn't have a last name. Or at least no one knows it.
Well, that's interesting because Worm doesn't have a last name either.
Right.
And I don't think it... No, I think Atreya does.
Yeah.
But that's because she's from elsewhere.
You guys are from elsewhere, yeah. So it's one of those things where none of these people have last names, and they're trying to earn it.
Cool.
I think I might have had Arendor have a last name by now, but I'm not remembering it.
It could just be not necessarily common knowledge.
Right.
It's like half the people just call him my liege.
Right, yeah, basically. Or your highness or whatever. So moving from that, I'm gonna go into the champions of Áluinn. So these guys and girl are the original explorers of Áluinn. So once the kingdom was established and the ecosystem started to grow, the king sent out these these warriors and these champions to explore the ecosystems and find places for people to live and conquer things that needed to be conquered and things like that. So we have the Tundra Champion.
Okay.
Who is a male blue dragonborn paladin named Vimran Lumiseth.
He has a last name.
He has a last name.
Ooh.
Because he is a champion. He earned his last name. But he was specifically known for being the sole survivor of an abominable Yeti attack on his adventuring party.
Yikes.
When he was going out to do
so he's Lowlander?
Basically. No. He's very different.
Yeah.
But he went out to the Tundra land and
cultivated it, settled it.
Yeah.
Created 10 towns.
And then
are there 10 specific towns?
No, there's only 9. No, sorry.
Oh, damn. Rest in peace, Dogan's Hole.
The next one actually does not have a last name, but I think it's a lizard folk trait. Because I was looking at the name generators, and none of the lizard folk had a last name.
Okay.
So I just went with one. So he's a lizard folk druid.
Now, these are historical. Are they still alive, or
no,
are these okay? These are people that are talked about,
right.
But
these are historical figures that people are like, they look up to them and they aspire to be,
venerate
them.
their memory.
Yeah. So we have the male lizard folk druid named Listarid, who was known for creating an oasis in the desert lands.
Nice.
So as a druid, he was able to cultivate the land in a druidic way of plant growth and things like that. So
okay,
pretty sweet. Then he went to the desert lands. We have a female green dragonborn ranger who went to the rainforest land. Her name is Theldrilalid Hedera.
Dragonborn have hard names. They're tough.
And she is known for finding
Theldrilalid. Ooh, Delali.
Golly, what a day.
That's what came to my mind when you read it. I was like, ooh, Delali.
Theldrilalid. Ooh, Delali. She is known for finding the Emerald Falls, which I am still going to figure out what specifically that is, but it is a landmark in the rainforest.
Cool. I was going to ask, but if you have not done that part yet, that was going to be my follow-up question is, what is the Emerald Falls? But we'll get back to that on a later date.
The only thing I have figured out is that it's very like a green, like even the water is like shining green, and then like there's jewels and stuff that they found in the falls.
Very nice.
But I'll build some more lore around that at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
The last one that I have for today.
For today only.
Is a male dwarf barbarian named Thortharm Tankard.
What a dwarven name.
Right? Thortharm. And
if
he
you
went
could say
to Thortharm.
There you go.
Thortharm Tankard. And he went to the mountainous terrains, and he was known for clearing the mountains of goblins and orcs.
Wonderful.
And that's all I got, baby.
Very nice. Very nice. I like it a lot.
But yeah, so those are some of the ones that I was able to come up with. There's definitely more. It's 1,000 years of history, so And
I mean that's one of the things that we kind of talked about in the world building episode is leave it vague enough, like don't fill out every single thing, so that when we come across something, you have that opportunity to fill in those gaps as needed
Yeah.
instead of trying to fill in 1,000 years of history all at
Right.
once. You can just kind of like, okay, so we have this generalized idea, and then we come across, like, you're able to now put something in there. It's like, oh yeah, there's this weird like runic stone circle that's here. Like, oh, what does that mean? And we can explore that and figure out what it's about.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's known, but not to us because we're not from here.
Right.
Except for Aaliyah.
Yeah. And you can either ask her and figure it out from there, or ask, other townspeople or people that live around those kinds of places.
Yeah, so you have your way of lore dropping without having told us all in advance.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right.
Also, like, I didn't think about this before until we were just talking about it. I was like, man, I should have left the names vague, or even more vague. So if we wanted to do prequel sessions or one-shots or anything like that, it'd be something kind of fun.
Well, for that kind of thing, so like you could be an adventuring party that was working under one of the champions.
Yeah.
So it's not like they single-handedly went out and did this.
No.
And even the one with the abominable Yeti attack, you could be his adventuring party that all gets killed off. Like,
yeah, exactly. And
just be
I
like, hey, make a character you don't super care about.
And that's kind of like what I was thinking about too. Was there's a Critical Role one shot kind of. I think they did a mini series about it, where it was the Calamity, and this was a big historical thing that happened, but they made an entire story out of it where you knew everybody was gonna die.
Yeah,
and like everything was gonna fail, but it was still so amazing to watch them like try and fix it, or realize that they're not going to, and just go, all right.
Yeah. So we actually did one like that in my homebrew world where I wanted to introduce the villain from one of my characters' backstories. He was a weird mutated goblin named Grothmog, which, for those Lord of the Rings fans out there, I did not come up with that. He wrote that into his backstory, and he's like, "Hey, do you recognize?" I was like, "Yeah, it's very similar to Gothmog. I did pick up on that." And he was like, and I was like, "Yes, I understand. I got that reference. Thank you." But we wanted to introduce him because he was going to be like the main dude in the next arc. And so I made him an absolute freaking monster. Like, yes, he's a goblin. He's small, but there's something weird about him. Like, basically he was a demigod that was born of the demonic Lord of Slaughter. So he was like imbued with just supernatural violence and was really hard to kill and like all this other stuff. And so Heather wanted to run a one shot, and we kind of brainstormed this idea of like, hey, what if we had everybody make characters, and told them beforehand, like, hey, make characters that you're not super invested in because it's very possible that they're going to die. Translation of that was make characters that are going to die, because Heather was like, nobody's surviving this. And I was like, perfect. So I worked on making Grothmog's stat block, and then she worked on the rest of the combat, and then got like lore from me and like, okay, what are his tactics? What does he do? Like what kind of like troops does he use, and like how does he view his soldiers, so that we know whether or not they're just disposable pawns or whether he cares and wants them to stay alive, and like all this other stuff. So we made these characters, and everybody kind of made a character that was like, I'm okay if they die. Yeah. Except for one dude who wrote like a 3-page backstory, and I felt so bad because like he was like reading us his backstory, and he's like, I'm super proud of this character, and I was like, You didn't listen. You didn't listen, did you? And like, I didn't know how it was going to go, because I was playing in this one. I didn't know exactly how it was going to go down, but I knew that in the end we were all going to die. And sure enough, over the course of the combat, we just got whittled down, and she had like healers off in the forest that so the goblins would come and do these hit and run tactics, and they would get hit by us, and then they would run away, and then they'd come back at full health, and we're like, crap! Like, there's either just 100 goblins out in these woods, or somebody's healing them. So we started like looking for the healers and stuff. Well, the whole time just getting beaten down. There was like a Tanaruk, and there were orcs, and there were ogres, all under the command of this goblin army that was just brutal, and we ended up all getting captured and dragged back to this just horrible fortress that Grothmog had made. And yeah, I mean, it was brutal, and everybody died, and the one guy was like, I thought you said make characters that we were like might die, and I was like, yeah, but you still made one that you loved. Like, I mean, don't delete his character sheet. You can use him for something else. But he's dead in canon. Like, he's gone. But it was all this way to like introduce this villain that currently in the story that we were running, none of them were strong enough to even like touch.
Yeah.
And so it was this nice, like, okay, they have this in their mind that's what's coming. Like, this is a thing that is in the future. And we even had, so there was one sort of survivor. He challenged, it was my character. He challenged him to like a battle because he was this big freaking beefy orc. He's like, I can take this little punk, and just got absolutely wrecked. And basically told, I'm looking for somebody in the city. And it was this other guy's player character. He's like, you're going to go and find him. This is what he looks like. This is how he behaves. This is the way he is. You're going to find him, and you're going to bring him back here, or I'm going to kill all of your friends. Oof. And then, as soon as he left, he just executed them all and had full intention. Ooh. As soon as he comes back, he's dead too. And so they were just waiting for this orc to show up, like bloodied and broken and beaten, and she'd be like, you have to come with me. Like, please, my friends are in danger. You have to come with me. He says he'll kill them if I don't bring you. And they were just waiting for that, and the campaign ended before they ever got there. And I was like, no! But it was so much fun because like my wife and I, like, we collaborated and like helped, she did the bulk of it so that I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But she was picking my brain for all the lore and the tactics and the different stuff. She's like, okay, what would his hold be like? And I'm like, okay, this is going to be brutal. But in preparation for running this villain, I studied some medieval stuff. So this is what it looks like as you approach, and it does not get better on the inside. Yeah. And so, like, when she was, like, describing this, several of the other guys had also, like, studied some of this stuff, and they're like, oh, we're really in trouble, aren't we? And I'm like, yeah.
Just a tad.
Yeah. But that was fun. I do greatly miss that campaign. And I actually ran a one-shot for you guys that had, you remember when the undead army attacked, but they were worried about goblin attacks, and there had been all these goblin sightings and stuff, and it was actually refugees. It was people, because he was going around to every goblin encampment that he could find and basically giving them an ultimatum: you either follow me or you die. And if they refused, he'd just slaughter them all. And so there was all those goblins that came to the city and were like, we need help, we need refuge, like, we're in trouble. And everybody was like, do we let them in? Is this a trick? And then, like, the undead attacked it. It's like, let them in.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah, and that's why Heather during that one was kind of getting teary-eyed, because that one goblin, Scrath, was one of the main NPCs that was in that campaign, and he was talking about his friend Svets and, like, his people that he was kind of, like, corresponding with and working with, and she was like, I'm gonna cry. I was like, yeah, me too. I really miss this campaign. Yeah.
Oh man, maybe you should just start running that one again.
So
I'll play Lillander in that one.
My plan was we finish Icewind Dale, and there is a specific roleplay spell that was added to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that's specifically there for the DM to use if he wants to switch settings.
Okay.
He or she. But if you want to switch settings, you have this thing. It's called like the Veil of the Blue Dream or something like that, where if you have an object from this other world, you can put your your party to sleep and use this as a focus to draw you from one world to the next. And so what I was planning on doing with Icewind Dale, if we ever finish that, is okay, one of the loot items you find is this object that's wrapped up in a scroll that will take you to Zorse, which was the city that I had.
And then the lander can actually use it.
Use what?
A scroll.
Yes.
Because of what he's going to become.
Well, you're already a spellcaster, so.
Yeah.
Rangers can cast spells.
That's true. Yeah. Good point.
But yeah, I was going to kind of use that as like a transition from Icewind Dale to the homebrew that I miss running so bad, and then have it to where like you guys can hear of this other party that has kind of done some stuff, but with the way things left off, they're going to be occupied for a long time.
Yeah.
Like a long time. And so I was like, okay, I can have them dealing with some of these other things like the Grothmog thing, which it won't be as impactful because it's not in anybody's backstory. Bummer.
Yeah.
But there was also aggression from the Kingdom Zemok that was, trying to encroach on the territory of Foravir and this neutral ground of Zorse, because they're like, you know what? We've been dealing with you guys having, peace in your lands and having better territory and terrain and everything for way too long. We're coming.
Yeah.
And have that be like the arc that you guys get involved in, because you would be high enough level to deal with these threats and
Yeah, because we'd be stopping at 13th level?
So it depends. If you do all the extra stuff, like if you just go straight for the story, you can end it around 10th or 11th level.
Okay.
If you do a whole bunch of extra stuff, then it can go up to 13th level.
Okay.
Which there's a bit much in the entire book. I'm not I've already gone through a bunch of the quests and been like, I'm not doing that. That's too much. That just doesn't fit here. That's weird. I wouldn't have run the Id Ascendant, like that Mind Flayer ship, if we didn't have somebody playing as a Mind Flayer.
Right, yeah.
Because it just kind of was it was this weird sci-fi thing that didn't super duper fit with the theme of everything. Mm-hmm. And it kind of felt like it broke it up a little bit, but I was like, we have a Mind Flayer. I gotta do the Mind Flayer ship, spaceship. and I'm glad we did. It was
and also
fun.
We have the Space Viking too.
Yeah, exactly. So it somewhat fit just because of those two characters, but otherwise that would have been one of the ones that I left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Because it tells you, don't try to run every quest in here. There's too many.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with doing some side quests, but I do. Yeah. Even in video games, I usually do the story first and then do the side quests.
Oh, dude, I do the opposite. I do every side quest, and then by the time I get to the end story, I'm way over leveled.
Yeah.
The first time I played Skyrim, by the time I fought Alduin, I had already resolved the Civil War. I had already finished the Mage's quest. I had already done the Thieves Guild. I had already just everything, all of the other big side quests, and then a whole bunch of the small ones. I did all of them.
Yeah.
And so by the time you get to Sovngarde, I was just waltzing through, just none of this matters to me at all. Who are you, World Eater? Sit down.
Oh my goodness,
it was a bit much. It was he did not know what he got into when he attacked Helgen. He will learn. And they will know that Helgen belongs to the Helgast. Different game. Bonus points to anybody who knows what that's from and leaves it in the comment.
Yeah.
I will give you a big kudos and a crisp mental high five.
I'll give you a mental hug.
Thank you, Dan.
I need one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks again to all of you who submitted questions on all things D&D. We really appreciate it. Definitely made for some awesome conversation and definitely helped me build out my world a little bit more, and I'm very appreciative of that.
And we do plan on doing a part 2 to this because we have so many
some questions.
Yeah, we have so many more questions, and there were a couple that like I saw that I was really interested in because I was like, oh, Dan, this would be, and he was like, I did other ones. We'll get to those, and I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I was thinking we might get a chance to do some, but I was like,
we tangent too much.
We tangented too much, and then there was a lot that I had written down.
Far too much shenaniganery.
Yeah. But for those of you who are listening, thanks for listening to Critical Friendship. If you have any questions concerning anything we discussed today, you can email us at criticalfriendshippodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on our Instagram at Critical Friendship Podcast, and we'll try to answer as many as we can on our next episode.
Join us next time where Dan and I will be practicing and doing our best impressions of Mark Hamill's The Joker and hurting all of your eardrums.
I kind of actually want to do that. But as for now...
Stop rolling dice, Dan. You're embarrassing me in front of the Batman.